Isolation often feels like a punishment. It's easy to see it as being abandoned, rejected, or left alone in the darkest part of our lives. But what if I told you that it's often the very place where God begins His greatest work in us? What if isolation, the one thing we most fear, is actually the gateway to some of God's greatest blessings? It's a tough pill to swallow, especially when we're in the middle of the storm, feeling alone and forgotten. But when we look deeper, we see that it's in those very moments that God is setting us up for something extraordinary. God doesn't waste any moment of our lives, not even the painful ones. While we might feel like we're stuck in a season of solitude, it's often God's way of drawing us closer to Himself. In times of isolation, when everything else falls away, we're forced to face ourselves, our fears, our shortcomings, and ultimately, to rely completely on God. It's in these moments that the groundwork for the blessings to come is laid. God uses isolation as a tool to transform us, refine us, and prepare us for the incredible plans He has ahead. This isn't a moment of abandonment. This is a divine setup for something greater. Many of us are familiar with the pain of isolation. We've all experienced those seasons where we feel like we're stuck in a lonely place, wondering if God has forgotten about us. But if we look closely at the lives of some of the most powerful figures in the Bible, we see a recurring theme. Isolation often precedes the greatest blessings and breakthroughs. Think of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers and thrown into a pit, later sold into slavery and imprisoned. But it was in that time of isolation that God was molding Joseph for leadership, preparing him to save an entire nation. Or consider Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness, separated from his people, running from his past. Yet it was in that desert that God spoke to him from the burning bush, calling him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. The wilderness wasn't a place of abandonment. It was a place of preparation. It was in those isolated moments that Moses encountered God in ways he never would have in the midst of his busy life. And then there's Jesus, who, before beginning his ministry, spent 40 days fasting and praying alone in the wilderness, preparing for his mission on earth. In each of these stories, isolation wasn't a punishment. It was a necessary process for their personal transformation. God used those isolated moments to prepare them for the greater purposes He had in store. This pattern shows us that sometimes the most significant blessings God has for us can only come after we've been set apart, away from the noise, away from the distractions, and away from the comforts of the familiar. It's in these quiet, seemingly empty moments that God is doing His deepest work in us. When we find ourselves in the wilderness, the immediate reaction is often to question God. We wonder why we have to go through these lonely, difficult seasons. We ask, where is God in this? The answer, though, is often not that God is absent, but that He is doing something in the silence that we can't yet see. Isolation, when viewed from a spiritual lens, becomes a place of preparation. God is using this time to refine us, strengthen us, and ultimately position us for greater blessings that could not be received in the midst of busyness or comfort. Take a moment and think about a time in your life when you felt isolated. Maybe it was a season of depression, or you were going through a personal loss, or you were struggling with doubt. It's easy to see those moments as wasted time. But God does not waste anything. Every moment spent in isolation is a moment God can use to deepen your relationship with Him. It's in those quiet times, when no one else is around to distract you, that God speaks the loudest. We might not always hear Him right away, but He is working, even when we can't see it. The Bible is filled with stories of people who went through isolation, and from each of them, we learn something important. For example, when David was anointed as king, he wasn't immediately placed on the throne. Instead, he spent years running, hiding, and living in isolation from Saul's jealousy. But it was in those years that David learned to rely on God in ways that prepared him to be a king. He wrote some of the Psalms during this time, expressing his trust in God, even when everything around him seemed uncertain. His time alone wasn't wasted. It was shaping him for the purpose God had for him. Isolation isn't just about being physically alone. It's also about the times when we feel emotionally isolated. Those are the moments when we feel like no one understands us, or that we're misunderstood by the world around us. But it's in those moments that God can do His most powerful work. When we have nothing and no one else to rely on, we are forced to turn our eyes to Him. It is in that desperate place that God can fill us with His peace, His strength, and His purpose. He's not pushing us away. He's calling us into a deeper relationship with Him. Isolation can also reveal our true selves. In the hustle and bustle of life, we often mask our deepest fears, struggles, and insecurities. We keep busy, surround ourselves with distractions, and allow the noise of the world to drown out the parts of us we may not want to face. But in solitude, when everything is stripped away, we are confronted with who we truly are. This is when God can work most deeply, because it is when we are at our rawest that we can begin to see ourselves clearly. Think about the process of refining gold. The gold is put into the fire, and the impurities rise to the surface where they can be removed. In the same way, God uses isolation to refine us. It's not easy, and it can be painful, but it's necessary for our spiritual growth. It's in isolation that God helps us confront the parts of ourselves we often try to ignore. The parts that need healing, the areas where we are weak or broken, and the places where we need to surrender to Him more fully. This can be difficult because facing our flaws isn't always comfortable. In fact, it can feel downright overwhelming. But it's important to remember that God doesn't leave us in isolation to shame us. He does it to heal us, to make us whole, and to prepare us for the blessings that are coming. Think about the story of Job. He endured incredible suffering, loss, and isolation. But through it, he came to know God in a deeper way. His understanding of God's sovereignty and his relationship with Him were strengthened during his trials. And at the end of it all, Job was restored, and his faith was made stronger. God's greatest blessings often come after a season of transformation. The beauty of isolation is that it allows God to work in us in ways that we might not allow when we're surrounded by the distractions of the world. When everything is stripped away, we are left with the raw material that God can use to build something beautiful. The process might be difficult, but the end result is worth it. Just like a sculptor chips away at a block of marble to reveal a masterpiece, God uses isolation to shape us into the people He created us to be. And when we come out of that time of solitude, we are more aligned with His will, ready to receive the blessings He has been preparing for us all along. The challenge, however, is that isolation often feels like it will never end. When we're in the midst of it, it can feel like we're stuck in a place of endless waiting, where nothing is changing, and we're being left behind. The emotional weight of being alone can make us question God's presence and His plans for us. We wonder why we have to wait, why it seems like everyone else is moving forward while we're stuck in a stagnant place. But what we fail to realize in those moments is that God is always working, even when we can't see it. The waiting is never wasted. Just as a seed needs time underground to grow roots before it can sprout, we need time in isolation to develop spiritually, before we can step into the next season of our lives. God is not idle in your isolation. He is preparing you for the fullness of His plans. While you might feel like nothing is happening, God is at work beneath the surface, shaping you into the person you need to be to carry the blessings He has for you. There is a verse in Isaiah that reminds us that God's ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. When we're in isolation, we're looking at our circumstances from a limited perspective. We see the pain, the loneliness, the waiting, and it feels like it's all for nothing. But God sees the bigger picture. He knows that in this time, He is teaching us, refining us, and preparing us for something greater. He sees the end from the beginning, and He knows that the blessings He has in store for us can only be received after we have been properly prepared. This is a difficult truth to accept when we're in the midst of our own wilderness. But the Bible assures us that there is a purpose to every season of life. Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for everything under the sun. And while our time of isolation may feel like a long, painful waiting period, it is just one part of the larger journey God has designed for us. Trusting that God is using this time for our good, even when we don't understand it, is an act of faith that opens the door for His blessings to come. The key is to hold on to hope in the waiting. It's easy to lose sight of God's promises when we feel like nothing is happening. But remember that even in the stillness, God is working. And when the time is right, He will reveal the blessings that He has been preparing for us in our time of solitude. Just as He brought Joseph out of prison and into a position of power, just as He led Moses from the wilderness to lead His people out of Egypt, God is working in your isolation to bring you into the fullness of His promises. The breakthrough is coming, and you will step into the blessings He has been preparing for you all along. As we continue to navigate these seasons of isolation, it's important to recognize that God uses these moments to refine not just our character, but our faith. One of the most profound lessons we learn during times of solitude is the importance of trusting God completely. When everything around us is uncertain, when we feel alone and abandoned, our trust in God is tested. It's easy to believe in God when everything is going well. But when we are in the depths of isolation, we must learn to trust Him, even when we can't see the way forward. This is where true faith is built. Faith isn't about knowing everything or having all the answers. It's about trusting God in the midst of uncertainty. It's about surrendering to Him when we don't understand His ways. It's about holding on to His promises even when we don't see them being fulfilled in the way we expect. Trusting God in isolation means believing that He is still at work, even when we can't feel His presence. It's in these moments of uncertainty that our faith is stretched and strengthened, preparing us for the greater purpose He has for us. Consider the story of Abraham. When God called him to leave his homeland and promised to make him the father of many nations, Abraham didn't know exactly how it would all unfold. There was a lot of waiting and uncertainty. For years, Abraham and Sarah were isolated in their longing for a child, but they held on to God's promise. Their faith was tested in isolation, and it was during those long years of waiting that God was preparing them to receive the blessing. It wasn't until they had completely surrendered their own plans that God's promise came to fruition in a way they never could have imagined. It's similar in our lives. When we are in a place of isolation, we are often forced to face our deepest fears, doubts, and weaknesses. But rather than letting those feelings overwhelm us, God invites us to lean on Him, to trust Him in ways that we never have before. This is how our faith is deepened. The longer we wait in faith, the more we learn about God's faithfulness and timing. And when the blessings do finally come, we are able to receive them with humility and gratitude, knowing that it was God's strength, not our own, that carried us through the waiting. It's also important to realize that God's timing is always perfect. What may feel like a long, drawn-out period of isolation is actually part of His plan to mold us and prepare us for what's to come. The Bible tells us that God makes everything beautiful in its time. We may not understand why we're waiting or why things aren't moving as quickly as we'd like, but God is working behind the scenes, setting everything up for the perfect moment. And when that moment comes, we'll be ready to step into the blessings He has prepared for us. Not because of our own efforts, but because of the faith and trust we built in the waiting. God doesn't waste any season of our lives, especially the difficult ones. If you are in a season of isolation, trust that it's not a punishment or a sign that God has forgotten you. Instead, see it as an opportunity for God to refine you, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for the greater blessings He is about to pour into your life. Remember, just as gold is refined in fire, your faith is refined in isolation. You are being prepared for something greater. As we lean into these times of isolation, we start to see that they are not just about spiritual growth. They are about preparing us for a deeper level of intimacy with God. It's easy to see isolation as a time when we are distant from others, but in reality, it can be a powerful opportunity to grow closer to God. The isolation forces us to rely on Him in ways we never could if we were constantly surrounded by distractions and comfort. When we are alone, we have no choice but to look inward and upward, to search for God's presence, to listen more intently for His voice, and to recognize how much we need Him. In the Bible, we see numerous examples of individuals who had to face isolation in order to experience God in a more profound way. Think about the Apostle Paul, who spent years in prison, isolated from the world and from his ministry. But it was during that time of isolation that Paul wrote some of his most powerful letters that continue to impact Christians today. The solitude became the very place where God used Paul to advance His kingdom, where he was able to teach, encourage, and challenge believers, even though he wasn't physically with them. God often uses isolation to teach us the importance of dependence on Him. We might be used to relying on our own strength, our friends, our jobs, or our relationships. But in isolation, all those things are stripped away. We are forced to confront our need for God in a way that feels uncomfortable, but is absolutely necessary for spiritual maturity. God uses these moments to show us that He is enough, that we don't need anything or anyone else to be content. In fact, it's in the solitude where we can truly understand the sufficiency of His grace. This closeness with God is not just about spiritual growth, it's about healing. Many times, we seek distractions or company to avoid dealing with the wounds, insecurities, or fears within us. But isolation can bring all those things to the surface in a way that compels us to confront them. And as we face these struggles with God by our side, He heals us. He fills the empty spaces in our hearts with His peace and love. Isolation becomes a time of inner healing and restoration. When we are forced to confront our own weaknesses and wounds, it's God who comforts and heals, reminding us that we are never alone in our pain. He is present, even in the darkest times, and through His presence, we experience a deep, personal healing that strengthens our relationship with Him. Think about the comfort Jesus offered to His disciples. When they faced fear and confusion, He was there, often in the quiet moments, offering peace and assurance. The same is true for us. When we experience isolation, we may feel like we are surrounded by silence, but in that silence, we can hear God's voice more clearly. His presence is felt more deeply because we are not distracted by the noise of the world. It is in this quietness that we learn to hear Him with greater clarity, and our intimacy with Him grows. The more we embrace these seasons of solitude, the more we realize that they are not the end of something, but rather the beginning of something powerful. It's in isolation that God can teach us how to rest in Him, how to trust His timing, and how to rely on His strength. And when we come out of that season, we are more equipped for the journey ahead. Our hearts are more sensitive to His voice, our faith is more rooted, and our relationship with God is deeper than ever before. In addition to the personal growth and intimacy with God that isolation brings, there's another crucial benefit. It is in solitude that God often reveals His purpose for our lives. Without the noise and distractions of everyday life, we are able to hear God's calling more clearly. When we are isolated, we are no longer distracted by the pressures of society or the expectations of others. It's just us and God, and this is often when He can speak the loudest. Many of the great biblical figures received their calling during times of isolation. Moses was called by God while tending sheep in the wilderness. David was anointed king while he was alone in the fields, far from the recognition and attention of his family. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness before starting His public ministry. These moments of solitude were not just moments of suffering or isolation, they were pivotal moments of divine revelation, where God spoke directly to these individuals about the work He had prepared for them. When we are in isolation, we often feel like we are in a waiting period, not realizing that this waiting is part of God's plan for our lives. It's in these moments of stillness that God often clarifies our purpose, giving us the direction and vision we need for the next season of our journey. Just as a seed needs time in the dark, fertile soil to grow, we too need moments of isolation to prepare us for the work God has set before us. This time away from the world is a time for God to mold us, clarify our vision, and equip us for the tasks He's calling us to. Isolation also gives us the opportunity to reassess our priorities. Without the constant noise of the world telling us what's important, we are able to listen to what God truly desires for us. This is when we begin to realize that our life's purpose is not about seeking fame, wealth, or success by worldly standards, but about serving God and fulfilling the calling He has placed on our lives. This period of reflection and spiritual recalibration is vital for growth and for stepping into the blessings God has for us. It is during these seasons that God prepares us for the roles and responsibilities ahead. He doesn't waste the time we spend alone. Rather, He uses it to equip us with the inner strength, the wisdom, and the humility we need to fulfill His will. Just like a soldier trains in isolation, learning to rely on his own strength before going to battle, we too must learn to rely on God in these quiet moments, knowing that when the time is right, we will be ready to step into the fullness of His purpose for us. The key takeaway here is that isolation is not a place where we are forgotten. It's a place where we are being prepared. It's a place where we can hear God's voice more clearly, receive direction for our lives, and gain the spiritual insight we need to move forward. We often fear that these seasons of solitude mean we are being overlooked, but in reality, they are the spaces where God is doing His most significant work in us, preparing us for the blessings He's about to release. So, if you find yourself in a season of isolation, know that it's not wasted time. It's the beginning of God revealing His perfect plan for you. The beauty of isolation, especially from a spiritual perspective, is that it allows us to shed the external layers that we often wear to mask who we really are. It's easy to hide behind our achievements, our relationships, or the roles we play in life. But when everything is stripped away, we are left with nothing but our true selves. And in those moments, God can begin to work on the deepest parts of our hearts. Many times we don't even realize the things we've been relying on for validation or security until we find ourselves alone. It's in isolation that we're forced to confront the parts of ourselves that we might not have fully dealt with. Our insecurities, our pride, our fears, and our doubts. These moments can feel painful, but they are also necessary. God uses these times to refine us, to purify our hearts, and to prepare us for a deeper and more meaningful relationship with Him. Take, for example, the story of Jacob. After deceiving his brother Esau, Jacob found himself alone, fleeing for his life. He was isolated in the wilderness, with nothing to his name, and that's when he had the famous encounter with God, wrestling with the angel. It was in that moment of isolation and struggle that God changed his name from Jacob to Israel, signifying a new identity and a new purpose. Jacob's story teaches us that isolation can be a transformative time, a time when we wrestle with God and emerge stronger, more aligned with His will, and more secure in our identity in Him. Isolation has a way of revealing our weaknesses, but it also reveals our strength in God. When we are forced to rely solely on Him, we discover a deeper level of trust and dependence that we might not have found otherwise. It's in those quiet moments, when we feel like we're at our lowest, that we come to realize how much God is truly with us. We are never truly alone. God is always working, even in the silence. He is shaping us into the people He's called us to be, not based on our external accomplishments, but based on who we are in Him. It's also during these times that we can begin to let go of the things that have held us back. The distractions, the busyness, the constant pull of the world. All of these things fade away in isolation. And with that fading comes the clarity to hear God's voice more clearly. This is when we can discern what truly matters and what doesn't. It's when we begin to understand that our value is not in what we do or what we have, but in who we are in Christ. Isolation becomes the space where God refines us, redefines us, and restores us to the person He has always intended us to be. So, if you are in a season of isolation, know that it's not a season to dread, but a season to embrace. It's an opportunity to step away from the distractions, confront the parts of yourself that need healing, and allow God to work deeply in your heart. Through isolation, you will emerge stronger, more secure in your identity, and more prepared to step into the blessings God has been preparing for you. Trust the process. God is doing a work in you that you may not fully understand now, but you will see the fruit of it in His perfect time. The next step in this journey of isolation is understanding the importance of surrender. In times of solitude, we often face the question of control. How much do we really have control over our circumstances, our future, or even our emotions? When we are isolated, all the things we normally rely on for comfort and security are no longer available. This is where the challenge lies, in surrendering everything to God. It's easy to hold on to our plans, our desires, and our sense of control when life is going well. But isolation strips away these comforts and forces us to let go. In surrendering to God during isolation, we make space for His will to take root in our lives. Instead of fighting the process, we begin to trust that God knows what He is doing, even if we don't see it at the moment. It's in those quiet, lonely times that we can say, God, I trust You. Even though I don't understand what's happening, I know that You are working for my good. This kind of surrender is not passive. It's an active decision to release control and allow God to lead us where He wants to take us. Take the example of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. In His moment of isolation, when He was facing the pain of the cross, He surrendered completely to God's will. He asked, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Jesus showed us that surrender doesn't mean we won't struggle or feel the weight of our circumstances, but it does mean we choose to trust God's plan, even when it leads us into difficult places. Through this act of surrender, Jesus was able to fulfill his purpose and accomplish the greatest blessing of all, the salvation of humanity. Our journey in isolation is much the same. It's about surrendering our own desires and plans to God and trusting that He knows what is best for us. It's about letting go of the need to control our future and allowing God to lead us. Surrender isn't about giving up hope or resigning ourselves to our circumstances. It's about choosing to trust God's timing, His purpose, and His love. It's in this surrender that we find peace, knowing that God is in control and that He will guide us through the darkest of times. When we surrender, we make room for God to transform us. It's in our complete submission to Him that He can mold us into the people He's called us to be. Isolation becomes less about the struggle and more about the opportunity to let God shape our hearts, to prepare us for the next season of blessings and to equip us for the work He has for us. Surrendering during isolation isn't easy, but it's in that very act of trust that we position ourselves for the greatest transformation and the blessings that God is ready to pour into our lives. Once we have embraced the season of isolation and fully surrendered ourselves to God's will, something incredible begins to happen. We begin to witness our own transformation. Isolation is a powerful tool for growth, not just spiritually, but emotionally and mentally as well. As we face the loneliness, the uncertainty, and the waiting, we begin to see ourselves from a new perspective, one shaped by God's love and truth. It's in these moments of solitude that we shed the layers of distraction, pride, and self-reliance, allowing God to shape us into the people He created us to be. The transformation that takes place in isolation is subtle at first. It's not always something that we can see immediately, but over time, we begin to notice shifts in our hearts. We become more compassionate, more patient, and more attuned to God's voice. We start to see things in a new light, our relationships, our priorities, and even our understanding of God's purpose for our lives. The transformation isn't about changing who we are at the core, but about becoming more fully aligned with the person God intended us to be. We become more humble, more focused on His will, and more deeply in tune with His heart. One of the most profound changes that isolation brings is an increased capacity to love. When we're isolated, we often realize just how much we've relied on the validation and affirmation of others. But as we allow God to work in us during those quiet, lonely times, we find that His love is enough. It's not about seeking approval from the world, but about knowing that we are fully loved and accepted by God. And when we grasp the depth of God's love for us, we begin to love others with the same selflessness and grace. As we are transformed in isolation, we also gain a greater sense of clarity about our purpose. It's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life, in the pursuit of success, or in the expectations of others. But in isolation, we are forced to confront what truly matters. We begin to see that our purpose is not found in what we achieve or how others see us, but in fulfilling God's plan for our lives. Our purpose becomes less about striving for approval and more about living in alignment with God's will, serving others, and bringing glory to Him in everything we do. The transformation that happens in isolation is often the preparation we need for the next season of blessings. It's in the quiet, difficult moments that God works out the impurities in our hearts, strengthening our character and faith. Just like a diamond is formed under pressure, we are refined through the challenges of isolation. And when the time comes for us to step into the next chapter of our lives, we are better equipped to handle the blessings and responsibilities that come with it. Isolation is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a process that leads to greater intimacy with God, deeper transformation, and a greater understanding of His purpose for our lives. When we emerge from isolation, we are not the same person who entered. We are stronger, more refined, and more aligned with God's will. And that is when we are truly ready to step into the blessings that God has been preparing for us all along. After we've undergone the transformation that isolation brings, we begin to see the fruits of our time alone with God. It's in the quiet, the waiting, and the refining that we are prepared to step into a new season, a season filled with the blessings that God has been preparing us for all along. But there's one crucial thing we need to remember. These blessings don't come automatically. God has been working in us, yes, but now it's up to us to step out in faith, embracing the new opportunities that He places before us. One of the biggest challenges at this point is understanding how to handle the blessings that come after isolation. When we're alone, we often long for the blessings that seem so distant: relationships, success, peace, and joy. But when those blessings finally arrive, it can feel overwhelming. We may find ourselves wondering if we're truly ready for them, or if we deserve them after all the waiting and struggle. The key to handling blessings after isolation is humility. When we emerge from solitude, it's important to remember that God has brought us through the waiting, the struggles, and the challenges to prepare us for these blessings. It's not about what we've done, but about what God has done in us. The blessings are a reflection of His grace, not our own efforts. So when we receive these blessings, we must do so with gratitude and humility, acknowledging that everything we have is a gift from God. Another crucial aspect of handling blessings after isolation is stewardship. Just as God used isolation to prepare us, He will use the blessings He gives to further His purposes. We are not meant to keep these blessings to ourselves. We are meant to use them to serve others, to bring glory to God, and to fulfill the purpose He has set for our lives. The blessings are not an end in themselves, but a means to an end. God's purpose in our lives is always bigger than our own happiness or success. It's about being a light to others and advancing His kingdom. This is also the point where we begin to see how isolation has made us more resilient. We've been through the fire and we've emerged stronger. The blessings that come after isolation are not just rewards for enduring the hardship. They are the result of a stronger, more refined faith. We can now handle the challenges that come with these blessings because we've learned to rely on God's strength, not our own. We've learned that our true worth comes from God, not from what we can achieve or accumulate. And when we face challenges in this new season, we will be able to navigate them with the confidence that God is still working in us. The blessings that follow isolation are not just material or external. They are deeply spiritual. They come in the form of peace, joy, and contentment that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. These blessings are a reflection of the internal transformation that has taken place in the quiet moments. And when we step into them, we can do so with a deep sense of gratitude and purpose, knowing that we have been shaped by God for something greater than ourselves. These blessings are not the end. They are the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship with God. A chapter where we are empowered to live out His purpose for our lives with greater clarity, joy, and strength than ever before. As we move into this new season of blessings and purpose, it's essential to remember that God's work in our lives doesn't end with isolation. The blessings we receive are not meant to be stored up and hoarded, but to be shared with others. Just as we have experienced God's faithfulness in our own isolation, we are now called to be a light to others who may be going through their own difficult seasons. The blessings we've received should spill over into the lives of those around us, offering hope, encouragement, and support. In many ways, our experience of isolation becomes a testimony of God's faithfulness. When we go through hard times, it's easy to feel like we're the only ones suffering. But once we emerge from that time, we realize that our story can be a source of strength for others who are facing similar struggles. Sharing our journey, how we went through the wilderness and emerged with a stronger faith, can encourage those who are still in the midst of their own isolation. Our experience of God's provision during our time of loneliness becomes a powerful tool to show others that God is with them, even in their darkest moments. This is where the cycle of blessings begins to multiply. God doesn't just bless us for our own benefit. He blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others. As we walk in the blessings that God has given us, we are called to extend those blessings to others, whether it's through acts of kindness, serving those in need, or simply offering a listening ear. By sharing the blessings we've received, we help others see God's love and faithfulness at work in their own lives. At the same time, as we give, we continue to receive. The more we pour out, the more God pours into us. This doesn't mean that we won't face challenges again, because life is full of ups and downs. But it does mean that we'll have a deeper understanding of God's provision and love. We will be better equipped to face the next season, knowing that we have already experienced His faithfulness in the past. We can trust that, even when we go through another time of isolation or difficulty, God will use it to refine us, just as He did before. Living in the blessings that God has given us after isolation is not about becoming complacent or satisfied with the status quo. It's about continuing to grow, continuing to serve, and continuing to trust God for the next chapter. Our blessings are not the end of our journey. They are part of the process of becoming more like Christ and fulfilling the purpose He has for us. And as we do this, we can be assured that God will continue to be with us, guiding us and leading us, step by step, into the future He has prepared for us. So, as you step into this new season, remember that your isolation wasn't in vain. It was part of the divine process that God used to shape you, to prepare you, and to position you for the blessings that are now in your life. But this is just the beginning. You've been equipped to go out and share those blessings with others, to serve, to love, and to continue walking in God's purpose. God is not finished with you yet. His work in you is ongoing, and as you continue to walk in His will, you will see even more of His goodness unfold in your life. As you continue on this journey, it's important to remember that the season of isolation isn't something to fear or dread. It's a crucial part of the spiritual process, a time where God prepares us for what He has planned next. The isolation, the waiting, and the refining are all part of God's divine blueprint for your life. It's in these quiet, seemingly empty moments that God shapes our character, strengthens our faith, and makes us more like Christ. This process is not easy, but it's one that brings lasting fruit. The blessings that emerge from isolation are not just material, they are deeply spiritual. The peace, joy, and strength that come from having walked through the wilderness with God are far greater than anything the world can offer. It's in these moments that we learn to rely on God completely, trusting that He knows what's best for us. And when we step out of isolation, we are more capable of handling the blessings and responsibilities that God has in store for us. But the journey doesn't end once we've experienced these blessings. God continues to work in us, refining us and preparing us for even greater things. The lessons we've learned in isolation are not meant to be forgotten. They are meant to guide us in the next phase of our lives. The strength we've gained, the faith we've built, and the closeness with God we've experienced will serve as the foundation for everything we do moving forward. As you look back on your time of isolation, it's important to see it as a pivotal moment in your spiritual journey. The loneliness, the struggle, the doubts, they were all necessary steps in God's plan for you. They were not meant to break you. They were meant to build you. And now, as you move forward into the blessings God has prepared, you can carry with you the deep knowledge that God is always with you, that He never abandons you, and that He is always working behind the scenes for your good. This season of isolation was just the beginning. The blessings you've received are not the end, but a new starting point, a new chapter where you step into the fullness of God's purpose for your life. And no matter what challenges or isolation may come in the future, you can be confident that God will use it for your good, just as He always has. Continue trusting Him, continue walking in faith, and continue embracing the process, knowing that God's plan for you is greater than anything you could ever imagine. The best is yet to come. If this message resonated with you and you feel like you're in a season of isolation, know that God is using this time for something greater in your life. Don't let the loneliness or waiting make you feel forgotten. Trust that God is working in ways you can't see yet. If you want to learn more about how to navigate these seasons with faith and purpose, subscribe to the channel and check out the next video. God is preparing you for something amazing, and we're here to walk with you on that journey.